Welcome back to Brick by Brick. We're going to do a hypothetical matchup, in this case, between the current Vice President, J.D. Vance, and the Congresswoman from New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC. So this is not, on the Republican side, a pretty likely setup for who their nominee will be. On the Democratic side, I do think it would be very difficult for AOC to be able to make it through the Democratic primary. Certainly possible. So today we're going to do a hypothetical matchup between those two candidates come election night. So I've already characterized all the safe and likely states, unless I'm missing any, but it looks like I've got pretty much everything. On the likely end, we have the, I'm missing the state of Virginia. Might probably more likely to be likely. But in general, let's see here, what else? Yeah, that looks like now we've just got the main swing states. So I will be starting out on the West Coast, and that's just moving eastward. So on the likely column for the Republicans, I do think that Texas may end up being the likely column. But for now, we'll do safe, but it might be a little bit closer to that. Definitely going in the Republican column, but could get a little more narrow. But in general, so we have the blue states here on the West Coast, and then we'll get to the first swing state, in this case, Nevada. So Nevada has a Republican governor and voted for Trump in the 2024 presidential election. So it will be interesting to see what the state does. It does generally have a pretty strong history of voting. It also voted for Democratic senators, so it's a bit of an interesting case fairly recently. So I do think that it would most likely end up in the Democratic column. And as far as it comes to the state of Arizona, Arizona went to Trump by a relatively significant margin compared to the swing states. It was, if I remember correctly, the one that was most in the Trump column percentage-wise. So I've got a pretty good indication that this state will most likely remain with will be another pickup for another state for Vance on his route to 270. And then right now we have the three Rust Belt states, the two congressional districts in Maine and Nebraska, and then the two southern Sun Belt states, in this case Georgia and North Carolina. We are going to go to now doing some lean. So I maybe should have done lean first, but in terms of lean, I do think that the district in Maine, it might be somewhere around that margin, but I do think it, in the end of the day, if the election were to be held today, would most likely end up in the Vance column. And then we get to the state of North Carolina. This state hasn't gone blue since, I believe, 2008 when Obama won it. So I don't think there is much of a world where it might get closer than it has been in previous elections, but I do think it's got a pretty strong Republican grasp there on the state. So we will go with the lean Republican rating. And then we get to another lean Democratic state. I'm going to go with New Hampshire. And this state has voted Democrat for quite a while, or at least the last few elections. So it's got pretty good indication that it will remain in the Democratic column. And with that, that brings us to 231 electoral college votes for AOC to 246 for J.D. Vance. And I think these next states are going to be interesting. I'm going to start off with Georgia. I do think I think it's possible AOC could win Georgia, but I do think that if the election were to be held today, and granted, the stock market has recovered, Trump's approval rating isn't super high, isn't doing great, so there is that, but some things are going well, some things aren't, and the LA riots has seen a pretty big amount of protest and some more disdain for the current president, Donald Trump. So I do think that it would be a difficult situation for J.D. Vance to lose that state in 2028. So we're going to go with that rating. And then next up, I do think we have two Democratic states. I think in Wisconsin and Michigan will most likely end up being in the Democratic column in this hypothetical matchup. But I do think, I forgot to do the district in Nebraska, so that one is going to be probably one more electoral college vote. I'm actually going to go with the tilt. It might be lean, but for now we'll go with tilt. AOC is quite a bit more progressive than, say, Biden or something, so it might alienate some voters. I do think that more of a moderate like Pete Buttigieg or something like that would probably have a better chance of doing well in a matchup with J.D. Vance than somebody more progressive, but we'd have to see what ends up happening. That's just my opinion. And then as far as this last state goes, Pennsylvania is difficult to characterize. I do think generally the three Rust Belt states there, that being Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, tend to vote together when it comes to the presidential elections. I do think that it would probably end up being in the Republican column, and that would give J.D. Vance a victory. I do think that, any of these states, any of these tilt, and even some of the lean states or districts could change, and we've still got a long time before the next 2028 election, so we'll have to see what ends up happening, but in general, this is the prediction I've got. Ends up with 257 electoral college votes for AOC to 281 for the Republican, which in this case is going to be J.D. Vance. But yeah, feel free if you have any questions for me to let me know, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.